Guys, the judge is furious. He doesn't appear to be very joyful. No introduction. Hello everyone, this is Morali with regular and daily content. Quickly subscribe to the channel and let's get right into this video. Judge Arun released additional files today, essentially saying that he is furious with both the defense and the prosecution. But he is also letting the prosecution get away with it in this case. The court in Diddy's trial said that while the prosecutor's confidentiality is acceptable for the time being, the parties should not anticipate that any communications related to the impending punishment would be kept secret. The prosecution submitted their file around 11:30 p.m. and had part of the information redacted in their response to the bail package. In response, the defense also provided a lot of information that had been withheld. Judge Arun's statement that the prosecution's actions are acceptable for the time being should be rejected by both sides. Now, people are observing the judge and asking, are you biased towards prosecution? Or what's going on? Many people did not want to hear the discussion we had about the jurors and how they seemed to be very strange, smiling, giving strange interviews, and biased against Diddy, especially since he is in a male-dominated court. However, all of a sudden, everyone is eager to find out if the judge is biased. Additionally, I think the defense censored a lot more material. A whole page was censored, with the prosecution noting that they had removed 3 or 4 paragraphs. That would have led to the identity or discussion of specific witnesses they might not want to make public. Now, the entire page that they blacked out about Diddy's crew was about a significant incident that happened at the MDC when some individuals were coming for Diddy and other prisoners. Either an attack was being launched against him, or it was unsuccessful. There are undoubtedly Diddy's friends at the MDC, but he also has his detractors. Enemies are becoming so numerous that a significant occurrence occurred at the MDC that we are unaware of and that the defense completely censored, due to the fact that it is top secret. I'm not sure who is planning or coming for Diddy behind the bars, but it appears that this man has enemies and has experienced such terrible things that the defense has, thrown it out, took it off completely. The 3rd paragraph is examined. If we examine this letter through the lens of the court and the legal norm, the court should first take into account how much the subject matter is customarily regarded as private rather than public when deciding how much weight to give to a wheat, i.e., statement of a right to privacy, financial records of a fully owned company, family concerns, sickness, humiliating behavior with little public repercussions. And similar issues are considered to be more significant barriers to access than behavior that significantly impacts the general public. It is also necessary to consider the type and extent of the damage. Lastly, when weighing the qualified right of public access against the interest in privacy, the court must take into account the subjects and the materials, sensitivity, as well as whether the person has a fair chance to refute any claims made in the information. The July 31st letter, which exclusively includes comments made by victims and witnesses to the government and law enforcement that were not revealed during the trial, contains only minor redactions suggested by the government. First, the suggested redactions comply with the court's protective order, which regulates all 3,500 items, including the victims' and witnesses' immediate statements. Furthermore, in its proposed redaction of the July 31st letter, which amounted to approximately 4 sentences in its 11-page motion, the government carefully balanced the public interest in disclosure with the necessity of protecting the privacy interests of witnesses and victims who voluntarily cooperate with the government, especially when discussing sensitive subjects. The censored material, which includes approximate details, may nonetheless allow for the identification of victims and witnesses even while the identities of pertinent parties are anonymized. Additionally, victims' testimonies to law enforcement regarding extremely sensitive occurrences are described in the censored material. Therefore, any public interest in disclosure was overwhelmed by the need to safeguard the privacy of these victims. Once more, they are essentially telling the prosecution, or at least assisting in the explanation, that what you have done is okay, but that both parties should not be redacted in the punishment. Actually, for both sides. Judge Arun is therefore currently in a serious mood. He isn't being reserved. He appears to be quite disturbed and agitated by what has transpired. Well, I'm going to decline this one as well, because clearly, you guys haven't learned your lesson with basically what you are saying, Judge Arun said, repeatedly rejecting the bail package, which I believe has enraged him. Additionally, I believe that Mark Agnell's bail package fell short. The money isn't the point. The judge has already seen it and rejected your offer of $50 million, so that isn't the point. The judge denied it on the grounds that it is impossible to regulate some of the violent acts Diddy may do behind closed doors. Therefore, Mark Agnella should have followed through on his prearranged strategy, or, as you say, proposed a new bail package that would allow the judge to view any private moments of misconduct. They must be even more strict and accommodating, so that every death that occurs outside of the prison may be recorded. This is what I believe they ought to have done, but sort of ignored. And perhaps they can make an argument for it when it comes to their side of the sentence. Mark Agnell, Diddy's lawyer, arrived today to do the interview. In one statement, he mentioned when he would return to Madison Square Garden. He told me that he did, and that he would be returning to Madison Square Garden. What is he doing? He's being on stage, I suppose? He stressed that they haven't really sought Trump for a pardon or spoken to his team. According to Nicole Westmoreland, they had communication with Trump's staff yesterday. In her CNN interview, she stated as much. And according to Mark Mill on CBS Today, that hasn't occurred. Therefore, there is something shady about these lawyers. One of them must tell their narrative clearly. Someone has lied here. Additionally, it seems that Mark Neffo was informed that he may do this interview, or that he wished to do so. Clear up some confusion on Da's behalf, because it appears desperate and like you want to take action when you talk about Trump's name in public. And it will enrage him that you appear to have gotten in touch with his administration. Mark Agnell arrived today to explain that we didn't talk to them because they don't want Trump's name to be mentioned in the media in this way, since it will enrage him. And you will be further removed from the possibility of a pardon, which I don't even think will occur. Therefore, I feel as though the lawyers themselves are fighting, arguing, disagreeing, not communicating, because how are you all working together as a team, in-house, and then coming out to give a public speech, following the trial while holding hands like Avengers? And you don't even know if you've talked to Trump's administration? There is a problem here. You two are obviously having problems with one another, as seen by your poor communication. Moving on to Ghislaine, I continue to discuss her because I believe it's critical to monitor her dialogue. She essentially came from a federal jail. And the reason for this was that she received death threats from aggressive prisoners who accused her of being a spy for spending 2 days discussing the guys connected to Epstein with Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche. Now that she is doing 20 years for essentially what happened. The convicts in her new jail believe it is extremely unjust that Maxwell was granted this move, which seems to have violated the prison's Baru regulations. In a further development, a law approved by Trump will allow Ghislaine Maxwell to reduce her term by up to 135 days by completing prison programs. These programs weren't offered before or in the Florida jail, but she is able to lower her term at the facility where she is currently incarcerated. After the Epstein incident, she even underwent this shock transfer, which caused the president's headache when the FBI and his Department of Justice attempted to shut it down. Ghislaine is currently living a luxurious new jail life, which I don't believe she deserves in any way, shape, or form. Thus, I believe we need to keep an eye on her and this topic. From where she is, she ought to be rotting in her prison. However, I believe that these are only minor steps because they had to waive her sex offender status in order to move her to that specific prison in the first place. And she is now able to finish prison programs that will instantly reduce the amount of time she must serve. Additionally, it seems to me that she will soon be liberated. I find it absolutely absurd that she was permitted to speak with the Department of Justice behind closed doors and that nothing was mentioned. The fact that she was given it after that brief problem occurred is simply completely crazy. I believe that there is a discussion about her getting out of jail much sooner, essentially being forgiven, and moving on to live a peaceful life on an island or whatever you want to call it, where she isn't disturbing people or doing anything on her own. And I believe that this will occur shortly. Additionally, I believe that we must monitor Ghislaine. It's crucial to note that although I have been talking a lot about Diddy, particularly in the last year and since the trial, I also believe that I will continue to bring Ghislaine up in these discussions.